Hello, hello, hello. This is Marshall Goldsmith. So happy to be joining you with LinkedIn Live. This is being powered by my friends at Methods. Methods, a wonderful, wonderful organization that really is helping coordinate incredible work in the area of e-learning and development. You know, my friend Justin, can you tell people how to really look at the previous shows that we've done?
Yeah, good morning, Marshall. Thanks for having us on again. Great to be working with you. Previous shows are available by going to methodsof.com/network. And there you can register for free and get every last show that we've done with Marshall Goldsmith Live, as well as other shows that we're producing for people like our friend Chester Elton.
I love Chester. Chester is a great guy. He's been on my show. I've been on his show. We are good buddies. He's one of our 100 coaches as well. Let me briefly introduce myself, then we'll get rolling. Got a fantastic guest today. My name is Marshall. I'm from a small town in Kentucky. Went to school in Indiana, got a PhD at UCLA. I was a college professor and dean when I was very, very young. And then for about the last 43 years, I've traveled around the world speaking and teaching, been to 102 countries, have 11 million frequent flyer miles, got ranked #1 leadership thinker, and then I coach executives. I've been the coach of the CEO of Ford and Pfizer and Glaxo and the World Bank and Walmart and so many wonderful people. And what I love about coaching is I learn everything. Just coaching is a great experience for learning. I had a great call today from my good coaching client, Sienna Mulligan, CEO of Guardian Life, just a wonderful, great CEO. She's writing a book now. And then also I write and edit books and articles, written or edited 41 books, mostly purchased by my friends, family, and relatives, but I have done 3 big New York Times bestsellers. So that's all been good. And let's see. I'm really looking forward to working with you today. I've got a group called 100 Coaches, and we're featuring people from our group. I decided to adopt people, teach them all they know for free, and all the prices they get old, they do the same thing. So my honorary family here is just an amazing group of human beings. And one of them is my wonderful friend who's with us today, Elliot Masie. I love Elliot Masie. He is just a fantastic human being. He invented that term e-learning. He's one of the world's experts on digital learning and e-learning, #1. #2, he's run conferences, which has got to be a fascinating thing to look at today because you don't have human beings show up anymore. He's been a political organizer. He worked for people like Bobby Kennedy, Barack Obama. He's been a political organizer. And finally, he and I have another thing in common. We love Broadway. Love Broadway. He's a producer of Broadway shows. Yeah, there's no business, like show business. So I just love Broadway. So Elliot and I are both fans of Broadway. We both have second homes in New York City too. So he lives in Saratoga, New York, where we're all locked in. I'm in La Jolla, California, north of San Diego. Elliot, can you take just a couple of minutes, introduce yourself to the people, and then we'll get rolling.
Absolutely, Marshall. And it's an honor to be with you, and it's an honor to be with all of you, wherever you are. And we are at a moment of wherever. We are wherever we are right now. My passion, as Marshall has said, has all my life been to pull together three things. I am a geek. I was involved in technology from the early days. Bill Gates had me host Microsoft Television when Windows 95 came out. My second passion has always been learning. How do we learn? How do we learn skills? How do we learn our competencies? How do we learn the things we're interested in? I, in fact, start to learn the accordion again in a few days. And my third is this concept of the moment. How do we build a moment of engagement, of entertainment? And they all came together. And so that's been my passion. And I am about to be 70 in 1 month. And I have been doing this for about 50 years, my friend.
Elliot, first question, e-learning. Elliot invented a term called e-learning. It's been popularized around the world since you invented it. Elliot, what is e-learning?
Well, it popped up, and I think inventions happen in multiple places at once, so I'm probably one of several people who helped that. But it popped up when the internet came out. And suddenly the idea would be, just as we were dealing with email, e-commerce, we got the idea that what if we actually could use the internet to help deliver, facilitate learning. And in the early 1990s, I was part of some conversations about what would we call it, and the word E popped in. Now, unfortunately, Marshall, people think of the E as electronic, and certainly it's electronic. But I get intrigued about what the E in e-learning could be. That goes to my passion of a producer, a social change agent. So here's a couple of E's. Everywhere learning, everyday learning, evolving learning, engaging learning. In other words, we've now evolved where e-learning is just how do we throw content at people without bringing them to a classroom, to what so many people literally that are on this call are doing. Imagine you click on your computer and up pop 1 or 100 colleagues all around the world, and you have a moment of connection and knowledge sharing. So that was the concept of e-learning. Now, when we did our very first gathering of everybody in the world interested in e-learning, there were 86 people, Marshall, 86 people. My team just gave me some data points. Right now, there are 1.7 billion students in K-12 who are learning from home. We have 19 million college students in the United States. And the number's hard to get out, but probably somewhere 50 to 80 million workers are now at home. In fact, you can't order a good microphone or camera online. I think I bought you one of the last ones that was available, because suddenly the default has become learn where you are from people who are somewhere else, and learn it in ways that engage you, entice you, maybe even evaluate you. And later on, we'll talk about perhaps even entertain you.
Let's go to that right now. How about e-learning for E as in entertainment? Talk about that. That's fun.
Well, I did something the other day, which was almost random, but it worked. I was hosting one of those webinars, one of those conferences that's online, and we were talking about learning in the pandemic. And it was a wonderful and somewhat uplifting thing. I said, well, what if I added 2 things to it? So I reached out to some of my absolutely favorite Broadway stars. I got Ali Ewald, who is the star of Phantom of the Opera, and she was in King and I and West Side Story. And I got Telly Leon, who was on Glee and just finished a year and a half as Aladdin. And you know what? I brought them into my webinar. They literally were sitting the way you and I are in our homes, and they sang a song. I had people crying during that, and it wasn't a distraction because we were talking about empathy. So suddenly the idea, you know, that when you give a keynote, you have to not only engage people, you have to entertain them, you have to make them smile, laugh, cry.
Right.
And so, you know, the compliance people don't think a lot about entertainment, but yeah, screw the compliance world. You know, right now we have to endure this world. We have to be empathetic in this world. We have to evolve in this world. And part of that is music, is culture, is entertainment, and is the power of storytelling. So yeah, I think E can also stand for engagement and entertainment as well, my friend.
Well, you know, Elliot, my son Brian is working on a project right now. We're getting Broadway people to give lessons to kids, and it's so much fun because I like you, I just love Broadway. Now, another question: e-learning, does it work, and how well?
Well,
maybe when?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question, and let's be, you know, you and I are very authentic truth tellers. Okay, so you know, when the pandemic hit, people did some things that were appropriate. They said to their staff, listen, we don't want you infected. Go home, work from home.
Yeah.
Colleges in the United States, you know, 19 million students were told, leave the campus sometimes in 24 hours, go home, and you're going to learn from home. And then we obviously have K-12 students who are doing that. Does it work? It is part of the way it works. You know, in other words, learning is not just the lecture. Learning ultimately is how do you engage, and this is the important piece. I believe that if you have learning that doesn't have curiosity that precedes it, it's in the ear and out the ear. So you know what? A lot of what organizations started to do was think that everybody who was at home wanted to sit down and go through PowerPoints. Now I'm weird. I think PowerPoint should be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. And when I told that to Bill and Melinda Gates, they got really upset, and they go, "Why?" And I said, "Because it's actually more effective than, you know, sleep aids in putting people to sleep." Well, PowerPoint online is like you know, it's on steroids. It's sleep aid on steroids. Now, if I'm doing a visual learning, what if I put a picture up that was an engaging picture? And what if I literally said to the students who are scattered around, go take your camera and come back in 10 minutes and show me something in your house that's mechanical? And they all post that picture. Now e-learning, rather than me talking to you, becomes how do I weave you together into an engaging community? And what's really interesting, if we bring 10 people together when we finally are able to, at a pizza shop, at a bar, on the beach, or wherever it will then be eventually safe, we organically know how to talk to each other. But sometimes when we think we're doing it digitally, we overproduce it. So e-learning that's just publishing is minimally interesting. E-learning that gets you thinking, that gets you provoked, that gets you, wow. I mean, to me, it's even, if it's interesting enough, I'm probably in the middle of it going to search something, take a picture, send it to someone. It doesn't need to be long either. I was working with one company. They're doing 5 minutes a day of update about what's happening in their business. And that's all they need. If they did an hour, you know what would happen? When you get a 1 hour thing, people may or may not stay to the end. They might eat breakfast while it's on. So it's an interesting, we've got to be, the E has to be evolving. And guess what?
Right.
The E is also erupting right now as we're doing that.
You know, one thing I need to learn is I'm supposed to tell people they're supposed to write questions in the chat box so we can get questions from the group. Now, you think after about my 10th show, I would have figured out how to do this. But as always, I forget everything. So I just remembered, please ask questions for Elliot. and put them into the chat box. We'll try to get to some as best we can. And then once we don't get to, hopefully Elliot, to have you back a second time or third time so we can talk again, because I love having you here. Now, Elliot, AI, artificial intelligence, I want to speak to a personal issue. Yes, Elliot, do you know there is something called video bots? Have you seen a video bot where they have a face that looks like yours and it talks, and your voice and even mannerisms and little things? Yes, Elliot, I'm getting a video bot called Marshall Bot. So I'm going to have my own little video bot called Marshall Bot. Hopefully we'll have AI. I'm going to teach little Marshall Bot everything I know, only not just what I know, what all the smart other people I know. Little Marshall Bot will know what Elliot knows as well. Elliot, Marshall Bot will give you credit. So then after a while, people can talk to Marshall Bot and he'll give them answers. Hopefully Marshall Bot will learn through AI. And my theory is, as I get older, my level of intelligence is going to go kind of down and down and down. The little Marshall Bot's going to go up and up and up. So in the future, when people call me up and ask questions, I'll say, just a second. They can talk to Marshall Bot. So give me your thoughts on AI, and what do you think about my Marshall Bot idea?
Well, I want it. Okay. In fact, I hope that the Marshall Bot then has you have 100 coaches, you have 100 bots around it. I can be when I'm in Asia, they can't pronounce Elliot. It's too difficult. So they call me ET, so I'd be ET bot. AI Marshall is both an intriguing and a distracting term. It's been around for a while. Gone on to Google, if you've gone on to Facebook, if you've gone on to Amazon, if you've gone on to almost any major site, AI is operating. Now, what does AI mean? It's another way of saying it's smarter tech. But let me give you some suggestions here. And can you put Marshall up for a second? Because I kind of want to see him as I'm describing this. So let's say, Marshall, that AI was a little farther along and you published a really interesting article. You have wonderful stories from all the people you did. And I'm reading it on my phone, okay? Now, what if literally, and there's a camera here and I allow it, it notices when my face looks confused. My eye goes up. Or remember, there are probably 1,200 dots on my face that biometrically respond to when I'm confused. And when I was confused, wherever I am, it blows up and says, maybe you want to know what this is, okay? It notices I'm reading faster, okay? It knows, for instance, what's interesting is I'm reading in English, but my mother language is Spanish, Hindu, Mandarin, Portuguese. And now I have the opportunity to look at it and engage on your content with somebody else who speaks that language somewhere else.
Yep.
We're already seeing it, ironically, in lots of the world being used with kids doing musical lessons, where the homework is mediated by AI, saying, what does the kid get? What do they not get? In fact, I would argue most people that fail a course or a topic, they don't fail. They got bumped along the way. I didn't get something. I didn't understand what the Lewis and Clark expedition was, but they don't know how to get the answer to it. So eventually they fail that course. AI would say, oh, Elliot's not understanding Lewis and Clark. Let's break it down for him. And I believe that breaking may be digital, or it may be, let's pop up a window from Pat in Saudi Arabia or Juan in Argentina who could talk to Elliot about it. So we are going to have more and more AI. I'll give you one other great example, which I think is a wonderfully interesting one. There's an AI program right now that predicts for faculty students likely to fail their courses. Because the reality is the whole set of behaviors that they have before they fail.
Sure.
They didn't come to class, they didn't finish it. And the goal is not to punish them, but to help them actually pass and get the degree and get a job. And faculty absolutely rebelled when it came out. But at the end, don't you want to have tech that helps you to be smarter in that situation? And I think this pandemic is going to push us in some ways, because if we really are going to be socially distant, our technology ultimately is going to be needed to be used to track, am I too close to a person? Track if I have a disease or don't, where am I? Even track what's interesting, my watch, which a lot of you have, has blood pressure on it. But it doesn't right now, the Apple Watch, have an oxygen reader, which is probably right now one of the most important indicators. And why? I'll bet that the next Apple Watch will have it, and it will be an indicator to you and your doctor that you ought to, someday we'll get universal testing. But what I really hope we get is universal early detection of things. Yes. And we're beginning to have it for diabetics and the like. So remember, when you talk about e-learning, it's not just learning a curriculum, it's learning how to be smart today, in that process.
Elliot, one thing I loved is what you said about helping the students. One of my good friends is Gary Ridge. Gary's the CEO of WD-40, one of the greatest CEOs I ever met in my life. He wrote a wonderful book, and it's called, My Job is to Help You Make an A, Not to Grade Your Paper. Historically, faculty have gotten so focused on evaluation, they forgot you're not there to evaluate people, you have people learn. Gary's feeling about life is, as a leader, you're not there to judge people, you're there to help people win. Well, and this ridiculous bell curve of performance appraisals, which just makes me want to throw up. But the bottom 10% get fired, which is just insane. It's totally disincentive toward teamwork. And one of the, no offense, one of the worst CEOs ever was Steve Ballmer at Microsoft. He implemented that. They hated it at Microsoft. They just hated it. It was an awful idea. So, why? Your job is not to judge people. Your job is to help them get better. And I love the idea of the education helping people get better. Now, Justin, do you have any questions for us from the wonderful audience?
Justin?
I didn't hear you.
Question.
Oh, here we are. Okay, there we go. Better with audio. Okay, so we've got a lot of great play from your comment on the FDA regulating PowerPoint. Elliot, Pasquale, Angie, Debbie, and a number of other people just were having a great time with that one. So well done. The first question is directed to you, Elliot. It comes from Dr. Jeffrey McGee, and he says, how do we vet legitimate e-learning SMEs versus the masses that are flocking to this space as coaching and e-learning providers are coming in the past few years? How do we vet legitimate ones versus everybody else?
You are asking the absolute right question. I think ultimately it's going to be a combination of what we call curation. I won't go to a restaurant if I can't look at Yelp and OpenTable. I won't buy something online if I can't find recommendations. And ultimately, by the way, I want them to be trusted recommendations. The other side of it, though, that is really interesting is that what's really good for me may not be good for another person. And so I actually think the learner needs to have access to dials. Dial up, I want it to be real conceptual. No. I really want it to be very practical. I want it to be very visual. And so I think we're going to need to get into almost a taxonomy where we can select those things that have the characteristics that we want and then find a trusted way of validating them. It's the ultimate form of user experience. Now, I will say that right now, with all the colleges letting out and all of the students going there, colleges are going to be different. I got to tell you, if I was on a board of Skidmore College for 12 years, if I were on the board of a college right now, it may not go back to normal in September. And I think that's interesting. I'm not saying they're going to go away, but we're going to challenge a lot of what is the right mix of expertise, academic expertise, field expertise. And I think we have to be able to realize that some of the best content comes from the community in that process as well.
Crowdsourcing.
Okay, Justin, another question.
Okay, so a number of great questions flowing in here. So hopefully we can get to as many as possible. This one comes from Melissa Roth. And she says, what do you see the biggest mistake companies are currently making now or will be making in the future when it comes to L&D in response to the pandemic?
First of all, I think L&D is not going to be about teaching. It's not going to be about teaching. Learning and development is going to be about engagement, about user experience. It's going to be about leveraging the knowledge that people have. It's going to be about also creating environments that are more knowledge rich, and in some cases, giving that knowledge to people at the very moment of need. So I'll give you an example. The airlines right now are laying off a tremendous number of flight attendants. Well, guess what? They all have a skill that, if they were willing to do it, would make them really good at first level people in the non-emergency room of hospitals, because they've learned how to deal with patients and the like. Now, we're not going to be able to send them off to class for 20 days for that. So how do we create knowledge that comes to them that could be quick knowledge, peer knowledge, on-the-spot knowledge, and even being able to use some simulation to fail safely in that process? And so L&D is not going to be about teaching. It's going to be about engagement, about empathy, about enhancement. It's all the work that Marshall has done over his life, which is, how do we help people optimize themselves, optimize the organization, and even do something that L&D has never said. Define what I'm not good at. Define what I'm not good at, and then let me do the other stuff that I'm good at. We don't have time for perfection right now, Marshall?
Elliot, I want to reinforce what you said. I wrote an article, and if anyone would like a copy, send me an email, marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com. And the article totally backs up what Elliot is saying. It's called Leadership is a Contact Sport. And Elliot, as you say, our research on this is very compelling. If you just go to a class and sit there, and you go home, you don't talk to anybody, you don't involve people, you don't get engaged, you don't follow up, your actual improvement in terms of leadership effectiveness, not as judged by yourself, as judged out around you, is no better than random chance. On the other hand, if you go to the same class, you listen to things, you hear what they have to say, you talk to people, you engage people, and you follow up, your improvement as judged by others is huge. So I just want to reinforce what you said. The article is called Leadership is a Contact Sport. Send me an email, I'll send it to anybody. Elliot, the original study we did was 86,000 people. We've replicated this with 248,000 people. So I got to think your instinct on this is backed up by reality. Now, Justin, we have time for one more question.
Okay, last question here is going to be, well, I think this one's a little more fun. So let's go with, Elliot, can you please speak to the evolution of e-learning, where it started when you first got into it, and where you see it going? And that comes from George Gindia.
Yeah. It started by trying to replicate what we did in the classroom. And that's true of any e-experience. E-shopping is like that. But the problem with e-shopping is there are no aisles to go down to. And I like to buy things as I walk down the aisles. So it started by replicating the classroom. It's evolved. We found, once again, that video is probably going to be more important than PowerPoint. I think we are going to evolve even more when we start to use more simulation and emulation. Hey, Marshall, one of the Broadway stars I had an opportunity to hang out with is Leslie Odom Jr. from the original cast of Hamilton. And he wrote a book about failing your way to success. Well, we need to figure out a way that people try things and fail safely. I want the pilot to crash the plane 10 times in the simulator, so it's not when I'm on the plane. And so I think we will evolve to a much more dynamic, challenging. I want every surgeon, before they enter the operating room, to have to do 2 minutes to show that their brain and fingers are ready to cut me open that day. And I think we're going to see that kind of dynamic technology evolve.
Well, finally, I'd like to say, Elliot, thank you so much for joining us. You've been a wonderful guest. If you do not mind, I would love to have you come back in the future. You're a great friend. I'm very honored that you're one of our 100 coaches, and very, very honored. So if you would join us again, I would be very, very honored to have you join us. Thank you again to all of the wonderful people who are checked in. And so thank you very much. Tomorrow we'll be back on, same time, same station. Go to www.methodsof.com. You can get the archives of this show and other shows. Go to my LinkedIn. Marshall Goldsmith, LinkedIn, you can see it there. So Elliot, and it will be archived. So Elliot, thank you so much. You're wonderful. Thank you very much.
Here, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.